Hello, welcome back to my channel. It is I, Vaporwave, coming back at you with another video today. I now have a microphone. It was a struggle to get this microphone to work. I filmed the first video of mine on my phone. However, I am now recording on my iPad because this only connects to the certain adapter which I don't have. It was a whole thing. I literally got freaking adapter for my phone so I can use this on my phone, and it didn't work. I'm like beyond livid, but you know what? We're making do, and hopefully in post it'll be worth it because at least my audio will sound a little better. Without further ado, I'm gonna get right into the video today. And much along the idea of anger and hatred, the video I will be showing you today is a list of writing tropes which, personally, I do not like. If you or anyone you do know likes any of the tropes I'm about to say, please, I mean this with no personal offense, feel free to like what you like. This is just my own personal opinion, and my words are not law. However, I am going to just be explaining a little bit more on why I personally don't care for the tropes in this video, and I promise that my reasonings are more than just my personal preference. So the first trope on my list today is a very classic one. It is the bad boy and nice girl trope. This one is arguably a classic, and that's half of the reason why I don't care for it a little bit. It's just been done so many different times in so many different ways. I especially don't like the trope when it's taken way too seriously. I feel like almost any romance book under the sun that you can find will have this trope. And I understand exactly why it works. It's an author's way to kind of live vicariously through these characters, because typically the people who are writing stories, especially romances with this trope, they see themselves as the more geeky person, and they want to be with someone who they view as rebellious. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. You gotta love who you love. But I personally just don't really like this trope because it feels slightly sexist at times. Especially if the male character, bad boy, is just way too overbearing. To a point where it's like, I don't want to say primal, but like, if your main character, bad boy, is growling every other word, and he's not like a werewolf, or even if he is a werewolf, I don't know, it just feels a bit hyper masculine and hyper feminine for my personal taste. This trope also usually will stunt the main female character at times because she's almost portrayed as completely helpless. Like, this also leads into like damsel in distress type of levels. Another reason I actually don't care for this trope too much is because there's almost an expectation for the nice girl to change the bad boy, implying that people will only change if you show them affection, or like someone you're in a relationship with who isn't the best person can be changed if you have the right mindset. I don't know, like, I'm all open for characters being able to change, but when it relies on the change happening because of the love interest, it just feels a bit toxic to me. So yeah, final thoughts, maybe it's just a little too heteronormative for me. But yeah, next trope. This one's another trope that is unfortunately common in a lot of stories. This one is the miscommunication. It's one thing for your characters to have a lack of communication, or they're not able to communicate in a healthy way, and like over the course of time, they learn how to communicate more in a healthy way. That's a little different than miscommunication. I cannot stand it when a story can be solved if the characters would just talk to each other. It's like if character A and B were talking and character C overhears that character B says that he wants to break up with character C, and then character C runs away before she can hear character B say they want to break up because he wants her to be his wife, not his girlfriend. It's just so frustrating, and the language usually surrounding it is just so over the top and ridiculous. I feel like a lot more people will agree with me on this one more than Bad Boy Good Girl. Maybe people will be on the same page with me as the first one too, but I feel like this one's just always been a frustrating thing to see in any like literature media. This one's very common in romance movies. It's just such a cheap way to introduce conflict for me. That's the real reason why I hate it. Instead of coming up with something actually clever, instead of actually having the characters' actions and personality traits affect how their story is told, it's just a simple lack of communication. Oh, he didn't actually say that, he meant it the other way. I don't know, it makes me tweak out. Now, these next few tropes are a bit more niche than the classics of Bad Boy, Good Girl, and the miscommunication are. I guess I'll start with the least niche of the three. I hate especially in like a YA novel or like a children's book or like, well, more YA than children's book, but I hate it when there's just a lack of parents present in the story. Either the parents are never mentioned at all, or they maybe are present, or like a little present, but they're like completely oblivious to what's going on in the actual narrative with their kids. There's certain YA novels that actually get away with this, actually. The Harry Potter and Percy Jackson series kind of explain away the lack of parents because they're being sent off to a camp or a school, something like that. One specific example of this that I at least remember myself is the series Kingdom Keepers by Ridley Pearson. This is kind of contrary to what I'm saying in this whole video, but I do recommend the series because, like, the whole concept is that these kids get transported into Disneyland with, like, some sci-fi magic at night. So they get, like, to see FNAF style, all these animatronics come to life and try and get them in the attractions, which is actually a pretty fun idea. I'll give them that. And I will say it has been a while since I've read this series, so maybe it's not as jarring, or maybe if I kept reading the series, I think I only read like 1 or 2 of these books. Maybe as the series went on, this issue kind of went away, but I just remember distinctly that the parents were like nowhere in this series. I remember them being mentioned as characters that existed, and maybe like as the kids are coming home from or like waking up in their beds from having these like weird experiences when they get transported into their hologram forms in their sleep. Like, these kids are clearly going through it, and their parents are all like, "Oh, you seem to have a long night. I'm sure everything's fine, though. Have a wonderful day at school." Like, it just feels a little ridiculous to me. I just feel like most parents would just be, like, down their kids' friggin' throats about it if their kid seemed off and wasn't talking about it. Or at least most good parents would be. Again, take my example of Kingdom Keepers with a bit of salt, because it has been a while since I've read the book, but I feel like that's the only example I can think of, off the top of my head at least. I'm sure there's many out there, and if you do have examples, let me know down below. Not gonna lie, guys, I meant to put on my ring light since the first time I filmed here, and I forgot. And I've been filming for a good 30 minutes, and I care about this channel and this video, but, like, I don't want to refilm everything. So, I'm so sorry for the random light that just kind of came on. I just wanted to address it. So I apologize for the small jarring light that's now going to be in the rest of the video. Anyway, another trope that I also am not a big fan of is another niche one. It's the bad author main character. This one's more, like, common in stories that have to do with adults rather than YA. Usually introduced in the first chapter of a novel. where the main character's like, I am a famous author, I've written X, Y, and Z, I'm a brilliant horror writer, I write all of this and all of that. But by the end of the story, this writer's subplot main character attribute goes nowhere. Two unfortunate examples, which I'm sure a lot of you guys will be familiar with, are Colleen Hoover and Stephen King books. The main character is an author is literally just a stand-in for them as a person being inserted into the narrative. Much like how I feel about the miscommunication trope, especially when it comes to the instances of the examples I used, it just feels a bit lazy to me. It's like, could you not come up with another main character idea that could have served the story better than just famous author is writing a book because that's what famous authors do, even though this is most likely a horror story and this will go nowhere. Other characters can just be such a fun, creative vessel in the right story, so I just kind of view it as like missed potential every time I see it done poorly, and an angel loses its wings every time a bad main character author is written to me. This leads me to my last example of a trope I don't like, and this one is definitely the most niche, but I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. I listed it in my notes as the extremely traumatized final main character. This is almost exclusively a horror trope in fiction. When the main character in a horror story survives a super traumatic event in the beginning of the story, and then it's almost completely unrelated to the actual horror story that's about to unfold. Right after this horrible event happens to them, typically they lose loved ones in this situation. The main character starts this horror story in a super dark and closed off place. When they finally start to open up and try to heal again, that's when the horror element kicks in. 3 examples of this off the top of my head. 2 are movies, 1 is a book. The first 2 movies that I'm thinking of are one you might have heard of, Midsummer, and one that you might have heard of called Fall, released in 2022. The book example I was thinking of is, of all people, a book co-written, there's 2 authors, but co-written by James Murray from Impractical Jokers fame. And I have the book here with me, it's called Don't Move. I again, much like how I was talking about Kingdom Keepers, I actually do recommend this book. It was my first ever horror book that I've ever read, and to me it just was like reading a horror movie. It was so fun, and I actually do advise that you check out this book on your own time. However, this book sadly does involve the trope that I don't love in horror fiction. Slight spoilers ahead for the entire first chapter, maybe second of this book, by the way. If I can, maybe I'll add a timestamp if I'm able to. I don't know if I can, but just warning you. In the first chapter of this book, we follow our main character and her husband and her kid. They go to a fair. The husband and the kid get on a fair ride. Said fair ride then malfunctions horribly, and we gruelingly watch these 2 characters that we just met meet a horrible fate at the hands of this tragedy through the eyes of our main character. Now, I don't know if you can tell already by the cover of this book. If not, yeah, this book is about spiders. Second chapter is the main character getting convinced by a side character to go on a camping journey with him so that she can help get over the trauma that had happened to her in the past, year or 2, since her kid and her husband's horribly brutal death. As much as I did enjoy reading this book past the first 2 chapters, the first 2 chapters really left me kind of stunned as an audience member. For me personally, it's just It's not rewarding to see a character go through so much already in the first scene, chapter of a story, before the real horrors can even begin. It's also just I don't want to say cheap, but I feel it can come across as a cheap way to garner sympathy for your main character right off the bat. Like, we aren't rooting for this main character because we like their personality and we think they're a good person and we like them and we root for them just because of that. But we're mainly rooting for them because we feel bad for them. Their main personality trait is trauma. And I don't know, it just feels like better. I don't know. It's just, it can get a little annoying because that's how the movie or the book will start off. So it just kind of sets a bad tone, which would otherwise maybe follow a really good narrative, like in the example of Don't Move. But with that being said, that is all from me today. Sorry this video has a bit of a more curtness this time around. It's just kind of a mixture of the fact that my microphone's being a pain and I forgot to turn my light on. But then on top of that, just we're talking about hate today, I guess. So yeah, a bit of an angrier topic, but I mean everything with lightheartedness and actual approval. In fact, all the examples I give, I do recommend you watch for yourself. Form your own opinion. Don't take my word as for law, and take everything I say with a grain of salt. Always. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you, hopefully, in the next video.